meeting. As folks know, I'm Alana Cadell-Tuckey. I'm the Director for the Office of Environmental Justice at the Department of Environmental Conservation, and I'm also the Chair for the Climate Justice Working Group. Next. So standard meeting room procedures, we're going to try to mute to reduce noise. The working group members should raise their hands or at least use the raise hand function just to make sure and indicate that they want to speak. For the recordings purposes, state your name before speaking. If we're remote, participants should be on camera to the extent possible. We are unfortunately in a position where it might not be nearly as possible. We don't really have a camera in this room, so we might be able to shift my laptop around the room, but we're going to try to make do. So where we are today is that we are nearing the end of our annual review of the disadvantaged communities criteria. Our technical team has sort of compiled information to assist us to wrap this review up. And we, as always, want to reach the goal of ending this on time, even if a little bit early. Next slide. So before we get to the agenda, just as we usually state, for the purposes of anybody who is viewing this online or is visiting in one of the publicly accessible rooms, this is a meeting of the Climate Justice Working Group. This is not a public hearing or forum, so we will not be taking any testimony or questions from the public during this meeting. Only Climate Justice Working Group members are permitted to discuss, deliberate, and vote. So if you're attending, we ask that you remain respectful of these proceedings, refrain from raising your hands, attempting to draw attention to yourself, or interjecting at any point. If there are any members of the press who have joined us today, we're not going to be taking any questions or making any statements. So if you do have any inquiries, please reach out to our press team. It's press office, all one word, at dec.ny.gov. At the close of proceedings, we ask that any visitors please exit the area if you're attending in one of our public locations. And as I said before, we're going to try to reduce noise to the extent possible, try to be on camera if you can, and we will move on to the agenda. Next slide, please. So we're going to start, as we typically do, with a roll call. Look to approve the minutes from our previous meeting, since we didn't get an opportunity to do that last time. Then move into the review of the disadvantaged communities criteria and some of those proposed revisions and scenarios. Continue with our deliberations on any potential new indicators, and then move on to our next steps. Are there any questions or comments, concerns with regards to the agenda? All right, hearing silence, we will move on to roll call. Next slide. Yep. So we're going to move on to the roll call. I can start things off. Alana Cadell-Tuckey here in Saratoga, and I'm joined by
Jill Hank, also here in Saratoga.
Apologies. And we look to see who we have in Albany.
Yep. You got Michael Duramio with NYSERDA.
And Neil Muscatello from DOH.
Amy Klein. We can't hear you, Albany.
Can you hear us? Can you not hear us at all?
Downstate can hear you.
I can hear
Alana,
you.
it might be your issue, if you can hear me.
She might not hear any of us.
It might be us. Oh, hold on just a moment. Okay, sorry about that. Let's try that again.
Can you hear us?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Hey, Lana, it's Michael Duramio with NYSERDA.
Hi, Michael.
And Neil Muscatello from DOH.
Amy Klein, Capital Roots.
Let's move to New York City.
Hello, Elizabeth Firth, Department of Labor.
Hi, Elizabeth. All right, and we'll move on to Region 7, Amber.
Hey y'all, Amber Johnson here at Binghamton.
Next, we'll move to our Region 8 office, Abby.
Abby McHugh Griffa, representing the Climate Solutions Accelerator.
Julie Suarez. Julie.
Here, Julie Suarez.
Julie, where are you calling in from?
My computer in Albany. If I need to be at the DEC office, though, I can run down the street.
I think we actually do have quorum, so I think that we are fine. Our folks are actually in at the NYSERDA building right now, so. But we do
Apologies
have,
for that. I just saw the
No, no,
WebEx
no.
link and
that's absolutely fine. We do have quorum, publicly, people in a publicly accessible areas, so we can move forward with our proceedings. But for folks, we'll put a list of the areas for people to take the meeting from. That's just so that everybody is in a publicly accessible location as per open meetings law. All right, now that we know that we have 7 people, just typically as a rule, if we don't have quorum, then folks who are not in publicly accessible locations would be able to ask questions, but they wouldn't be able to deliberate. But because we do have a quorum, everybody who is virtual is then permitted to deliberate as well. All right, so that is us. All right. Oops, sorry. Ugh, my goodness. All right, New York City.
Thank you,
Yes.
New York City. We're in Brooklyn, but there's no members, there are no members here.
Okay, all right. So we do know that Sonal indicated that she would be present. When she comes in, just make us aware and we will move forward. And just again, as a reminder for those who are attending, because I do see someone with their hand up, this is not a public meeting or forum. This is a meeting of the Climate Justice Working Group. We're not taking any questions from the public or comments, so please refrain from raising your hands if you are not a Climate Justice Working Group member. All right, am I missing anyone? Did I miss anyone? Did we get all members present and accounted for? I'm going to say yes, since we did one. Okay, so our first order of business, next slide, will be the approval of minutes. I sent around the minutes from our last 2 meetings, our meeting in November and our meeting in January. So before we move forward, are there any questions, concerns, or changes that need to be made to those minutes before we move forward? I see, is that Sonal?
Hi, Sonal
Hi,
here.
Sonal. Good to see you. Adriana did you raise your hand?
Yes, just to note Sonal was here. Sorry, I'll put it down.
Oh, no, that's fine. Thank you so much. So we are just moving forward with the approval of the minutes. The minutes are from our November meeting and from our January meeting. Just asking if there are any concerns or comments with the minutes, any additions before we move forward with voting, or edits that might need to be made.
I have one comment. This is Jill. I just wanted to thank Abby in my absence last month. I looked over the minutes and appreciate your comment about not wanting to make decisions without Sonal or I present. Thanks.
Welcome, Jill. Glad you're here. Glad you're here too, Sonia.
All right, so just gonna scroll down. If there are no other comments or concerns, we will move to vote on the minutes. Signify vote on the minutes. I'm just gonna go through again and signify your approval of the minutes with a yes or no. Starting with myself, Alana Kedel-Tucky, yes, I approve the minutes.
Jill Hank, yes, I approve the minutes.
All right, Albany,
Michael Duramio, yes.
Neil Muscatello, yes.
Amy Klein, yes.
moving to Abby,
Abby McHugh Griffa, yes.
Amber, Amber, if you're talking, you're muted. Okay, we'll come back. New York City, Zonal,
Approved. Sonal. Oh,
Is that yes?
Approved.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Amber,
Alana?
yes?
Okay, sorry, I was having issues with my audio. I have just a minor thing. All the notes here say Elizabeth, if they could say Elizabeth Y, because I don't want
Sure.
people to think it's me.
No, we can definitely make that change.
Okay.
Other than that, do you approve?
Yes, other than that.
And one more time, Amber? Oh, we lost her. I think there may have been a connection issue. Julie?
I read them and approved, although
Okay.
I wasn't here last time.
So we'll, with that, the minutes are approved. We'll, hopefully Amber will be able to jump back in and join us. I think she may have just lost connection temporarily. Hopefully she'll be back soon. All right, next slide. So with that, the minutes are approved. So we're going to move on and continue the process that we began in October, I believe it was, with the reviewing the disadvantaged communities criteria in accordance with the Climate Act. Next slide. One more slide. So in this meeting, the goal is to review the maps with some of the proposed new indicators. Then we'll be able to actually deliberate on those indicators and maybe have an interim vote on some of those. So that's going to be a way for what we've done in the past for those who were part of this process last March. We're going to gauge everyone's interest in preparing for a vote. So if following our discussions and our deliberations today, working group members feel confident that we could actually vote at the end of this meeting or, next month, we might need more time for consensus, but if folks feel like you feel comfortable enough to vote on at least one or more of the scenarios, we can move forward with a vote today. If we all decide that we would rather take another month to think about it and really, get into it, maybe have conversations, then we can wait. The goal is to see where we're at and whether or not we come to consensus. Okay. And then after we're done, we'll have an open discussion one way or the other and discuss potentially next steps. So for now, I'm going to pass it over to Alex to get us started with this everything related to the disadvantaged communities criteria review. Alex?
Okay, thank you. Next slide. I'll say today we are going to be looking at a ton of different maps, and really what I'd like to do is review the factors and kind of going through these 3 different indicators that we have been talking about for a little while. assess whether you all want to add them or not, and then kind of like review a little bit of the methodology and things. So let's go forth and start reviewing a little bit of data here, and I want to show where they fit in and what it would change as far as the counts. So here we've got the framework overall. By the way, please raise your hand, interrupt me if you have any questions throughout this process. We've got the two components, the environmental burdens and the population characteristics, and within that we have the factors, those kind of smaller buckets. For the three different indicators that we're looking for, we would add two of them if we do decide to add them, proximity to rail and proximity to airports, into the environmental burdens and climate change risks. Component score, diabetes would go under population characteristics. It would be a change from 45 indicators in the current mix to 48. Next slide, please. So under the environmental burdens larger component bucket, you've got the factor score, and proximity to airport and proximity to rail would be pulled into potential pollution exposures. So what that means is if we did this, you added either one of those or both, they would be kind of become an average inside of that with all the other different indicators. So it's not a huge change, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Now that we have so many indicators, you have vehicle traffic density, diesel truck and bus traffic, particulate matter, benzene, wastewater already in the mix. Those are averaged out together to create a factor score. Adding the other two would, change that score a bit, but not as much as you'd think. Next one. So for diabetes, it would go into the health impacts and sensitivities. And again, similar idea here that it would be one part of that larger or the set of indicators that go into that factor. Any questions so far on this? Okie dokie, next slide. So here's where it gets crazy because we have these three different indicators and they can be added in various permutations. Alana, are you talking? I can't hear you.
No, sorry. I'm trying to fix the screen since we're using my laptop here. So it's just me trying to mess around. So sorry, apologies.
No worries. Okay, so here's the thing. When we have so many different scenarios, because the first thing we did, as you all recall, is for scenario one is we just updated everything onto 2020 census tracts and then refreshed all the data that we could. So I'm not going to go over any of that just because we already voted in an interim fashion to move on with that. So that's going to be scenario one. But now when we look at the maps, what I want us to do is to look through scenario 2 and then scenario 5 and scenario 7 to really look and see, do we want to add diabetes? Do we want to add airport proximity? Do we want to add rail proximity? And then if there's a decision to add one of those or not, then we can start tinkering with what to add and in what scenario kind of combination do you want to do that. So these are the 8 scenarios and we have maps for all of them. Any questions so far? Okay, next slide. So one of the things that we'll note here, if you look at this crazy table and you look at the basic numbers at the bottom and just the counts overall, like for each region, there's not a huge difference between the overall counts of what is designated a DAC or not. What really matters when we're looking at these maps is not so much the end count, but rather is the addition of this new indicator or combination of indicators reflecting a more accurate map to you as we go through and kind of ground truth this across the state. And what I mean by that is there are going to be a lot of examples here where, say, New York City adds 13 DACs and also subtracts 12 DACs. So there's a net addition there of 1 DAC. So it's going to look like a 0 change, but it's those like the change between those 13 that became DACs and the 12 that didn't, that kind of thing. And that's where we really need to focus. Okay, next slide.
Alex, quick question before you go on.
Absolutely.
Abby. So I'm looking at the bottom line here, the grand total, and noticing that except for the plain well, actually it looks like every scenario is less than we would be, fewer total DACs than if we just stick with the refresh data. Am I interpreting that correctly?
It is, and that's actually something that we can tinker with. So one thing I was actually playing with in preparation for today was the thresholds that we can place on things. You know, we have this funky threshold that we do. And in fact, let me just start sharing now so that you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Okay. I'm going to share my screen here and we're going to start looking at maps. Okay. So, you know, this is the maps that we tend to look at in all the different summary parts. But I'm actually going to take you to this page. This is the page that might seem crazy, but what you're looking at there, Abby, was these counts right here. And yeah, they're less. But say for, I think scenario 2 actually is really close as far as that. But say we wanted to shift this, we can adjust these and fine tune them so that scenario 3 here is right here. We move this and make it to, let's see, 0.724. And now remember that was 1888. And now it's going to calculate. And now it's at 1897, which is really much closer to that original one here. We can adjust these, no problem.
Sorry to be dense, Alex. So what was that like what did you adjust exactly?
So remember how we have this like New York's like we have the both regional kind of breakout and that total 35% kind of overall thing. Well, there's these tiny little fine-tuned adjustments as far as the threshold for the state versus like the basic blank one versus rest of state. These are all related, so it's easier to just hold one constant and tinker with this. And we're at like, you know, the thousands, like this is such a tiny, tiny thing. They are mostly at 35% grand total anyway, which is why we didn't change them. But we can fine tune it. So when we're looking at just about 1900 all the way down. So if you want me to, I can do that right now. And then we can like have a more apples to apples comparison. I think what it comes down to is what the comfort level is changing that threshold, which again, we're talking minutia. So I'm cool with doing that right now, or we leave it and then there are disparate changes. So.
Sorry, just one more question to make sure I understand. So are you saying it wouldn't be 35% of the like total census tracts anymore?
No, it's just that the 35%, the difference is here, even in when you're like in the, say, the difference is like, say, 20 census tracts here, it's still 35% of the total. And that's what's kind of like mind boggling. I think the only difference here is scenario 6 where it's 34%. What we're talking about is that around plus or minus 20 census tracts being designated a DAC or not is a wash within the 35%. Because it's like the 35.1% or 34.99%, that kind of thing. So there's rounding error here. And that 20 DACs is that rounding error. Now, if we want to have a more apples to apples, keep it close to 1,900-ish plus or minus 5 tracks, then we can adjust this threshold.
So I guess I would just, I don't know what the right approach is in this moment, but I would be reluctant to lose DACs by adding indicators. I recall, back previously, we talked about the no DAC left behind
Yeah.
strategy. So,
Oh, let's do it
whatever
on the fly
makes that,
now.
whatever
I
makes that
mean, I think that that is a good purist move, like in the sense of like just trying to like make it as apples to apples. And it really, I gotta say this, for all these scenarios, the differences are small. And again, it's that like the shift between say those 5 DACs that were shifted within this scenario versus the other to either being a DAC or not. There's say another 5 that got taken away. And so that delta might be 0 tracks that are changed when you look at scenario 1 versus scenario 2 for a certain region, but there's still 10 that changed. They just like lit up or went away. And so it's that nuance that matters. So let's do this really fast, because I've actually tinkered with this a little bit, and I think we can make it so that they're all pretty close. So in this case, I'm doing scenario 4, and I want to see this bump up. Probably 2. Oh, wait. That's scenario 3. So, and I promise this will only take a few minutes. Okay, now we're good there. Here, we want to drop this down to 3. We're talking about like such a small change, but it does, like all these things, it's the details that matters. And it's really kind of a, judgment call. Okay, so this one, I think we're going to be about as close as we can get here. Okay, ooh, look at that. Okay, this one.
Alex, while you're doing this, and not to multitask you, I know you're doing. You have about 3 different jobs you're doing right now. The Tableau maps that everybody was provided, will those automatically update here, or are we looking at live changes that are not going to?
Yeah, we'll have to release the voting packet and also new maps to make these decisions, but I think it will actually be pretty close. Okay, now we're getting a little ridiculous, but I'm gonna try. It should be a pretty simple change. Okay.
This is Amy. I guess I don't understand why we're further manipulating the data. Because aren't we supposed to be looking at the impact of these added indicators and make decisions about whether or not we want to add them? And why are we manipulating the data before we do that?
Well, we're not so much manipulating the data as opposed to like the calculation to make it as, if you want to keep as close to an apples to apples comparison of 35%, but like really 35%, this is making that happen with the information we have. And this is something that we did last year too, to kind of make it as close as possible, or last time we were voting on this. So it's really your decision, and we can pull this all back so that it's not a big change. I don't think that would be too hard to do. It's just mostly this way you at least know that no matter what, even when you're looking at the indicators, that about 1,900 of them will be designated as DACs. And frankly, I think it's not a bad thing to do. Okay, scenario 6 is good. Scenario 7, we need to go, let's just start here. Amy, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, like all the things I've kind of talked about, how can I put this? I would say that if you think about all the things that we have been doing here, it's all interconnected, right? Like you can't look at or add one thing and then like say, okay, I want to just look at proximity to rail. The reality is that all of these things flow together. When you have kind of the strict, you add one indicator in, it changes the math just a little bit, where it's still, 35%, but there's just little minutia here that change it. And that, it's such a mind-boggling and crazy thing. But I think important to then, when you change these little thresholds, at least now what we can assess through this. Okay, I think I've got everything. Is plus or minus like 2 okay? Cool. Okay. Now when we look at say adding diabetes, we at least know that overall our net change is going to be like plus or minus 2. And so then what matters by changing those thresholds that way is that we need to look at the 12 versus 13 in New York State, or the 4 versus 1 in Long Island, to see whether that change is really informative and helpful. And that, I think, is a good way of going about this. This is something I wanted to mention today. Abby, it was like you were a plant. But I wanted to make sure that you understood that those are the little manipulations in the parts that we've always talked about, right? With the 35% and the rest of state, those are the numbers behind it that I just showed you. Any questions on the thresholds? Amy, does that still feel okay to you? Because it's a policy decision.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I guess I was just jumping ahead and, thinking, why aren't we just looking at the numbers? Because I remember in previous conversations, we had looked at some of these numbers and said the differences were so minor as to maybe be insignificant in terms of these new potential indicators, so.
Yeah, and that holds even truer now. But at least now, you know that you've got about 1,900 DACs, no matter what. So in that kind of leave no DAC behind, I think that will show. Okay, well, let's start ground truthing. And I think this is the first one. We have talked about, even from voting of the first version, of looking at and adding diabetes. I want us to go through and look at the places where things have changed. Again, it's small, but it might matter. And Jill, we're going to really want to talk about North Country, and then also New York City specifically for this one. And what I'll ask is that from the place of where you feel comfortable and knowledgeable in the areas that we're talking about, that you look at those that were added versus lost and see whether adding diabetes presents a more accurate map based on your kind of perspective. And again, these are small changes, which I've talked to you guys all about parsimony. And so I want to just say again, maybe this is something that we don't need. Maybe it is. We just need to look at it. Okay, there's nothing in Buffalo. So moving on, going to Rochester. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, Abby, so you can take a look here. I do want to, just because we have some new folks on this, I want to orient people into, we've been looking at these maps for ages, like it makes sense now, we know to look for the colors and things. But I will say this, it's kind of weird if not. Green, when we're looking at comparisons of different scenarios, green means there's no change. Red means that that's a scenario that in essence would be dropped if we added diabetes. It's only present in scenario 1. Yellow would be added if we added diabetes. So in this case, in your area, we would lose 1, Hilton Village, but there would be 2 additions here and here. Do you want me to zoom in anymore, Abby? Yeah. You mean you can't just like automatically like assess? Okay, so we've got Brighton CDP here. And then we've got up here, and I'm gonna butcher it, so I'll let you. And you're on mute, by the way, Abby.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anything come out to you about losing that one at the top northwest or these additions?
I think the additions are possibly helpful. So as of right now, I like this change, but
Okay.
always sad to lose one, but hey, we gain two.
Yeah, I think based on recollection of last time, what this is going to be the one, and Jill will want to talk through kind of the losses in the addition here, and whether it makes sense to keep it or not. So Jill, we got North Country next here. I'm going to zoom out just a tiny bit. If I remember correctly, this addition and these losses didn't quite make sense to your kind of thoughts. But Jill, I'll let you talk about this.
Yeah, so let me just level set and say that I read the voting packet, which was very helpful, thank you. And I totally recognize that the recommendation is that we wait until we have a full climate justice working group to add any indicators, and that's where I'm feeling comfortable at the moment. So I'm just gonna say that to start. Can you zoom in on Ogdensburg? I'm also still trying to figure out, there were some changes with the census update for the North Country, and I'm still trying to put my finger on all of those. So it looks like, is that just one census tract now for Ogdensburg?
Yeah.
I think previously there were 4 tracks there. And so the red will indicate that if we add diabetes, we lose the one remaining census tract in Ogdensburg.
That is what it indicates, yeah.
Okay, and then if we zoom out that track to the south.
Hammond
we'll
Village.
lose that one as well. Hammond.
Yeah.
Okay. And we would gain. Yeah, can you move? Yeah, can you move over north? Yeah. So it looks like, can you go back over to the west there? It looks like we're also losing Fort Covington. So that's.
Wait, where? Here?
Yeah, so the greens is.
Stay the same.
It doesn't.
Yeah, that doesn't
Yeah.
change.
Right, but there's one right next to it that we lost because of the census update. I
Yeah.
think.
And it could be more, and let me just jump here as far as this is the census update one. And so we can kind of look through what you gained versus not.
I have
Because
the old map open on my phone as well, which is helpful reference.
Nice.
Well, I guess the current map's not old yet. Okay, and then if we add diabetes in, we gain that track in the east.
Yeah.
And then we gain
Altona.
a tract, Altona, and then we gain a tract near Plattsburgh. Oh, maybe not, just the
No.
one.
Yeah,
Okay.
just for diabetes, it's these 3. So you'd lose 2 here and gain this 1.
Yeah, I'm not feeling super comfortable with that trade-off. I think some further ground truthing, but I think I expressed my concern about losing one of our only cities last time, Ogdensburg. I'm still pretty concerned about that. Yeah. I
Yeah.
also thought that the heat map in the packet was super helpful. Thank you for providing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those of you who haven't seen it, there is this heat map where we can look through the different summary scores. for each of the different scenarios here, or for the kind of main 4. But there's so many things that we could be looking at. Okay, so my sense is that you're kind of thinking, yeah, adding diabetes does not help with what you're currently looking at.
That's, yeah, accurate.
Okay, so I'm gonna just go through, and because there's such little things and changes, I do want to look at South Country really fast, and then we'll move down the corridor here. It's not called South Country, I am sure. Southern Tier, maybe. But we've got a couple different changes, and I don't know if anyone here can speak to these. But here we've lost in Southport. If we added diabetes here, we'd lose this stack right here, Owego Village. And then there's a gain in Binghamton for Binghamton City.
Can you zoom in really quickly on the yellow one
Yeah.
in Binghamton? Taking the south side. I don't know much about Elmira, nor Owego, so I can't say if I'm comfortable with losing those. And that area of the south side, I mean, it's okay if we gain it. I mean, it's not a loss. Gaining's cool, but I can't speak to Elmira or Owego.
Okay. Cool. Well, I mean, there's kind of some cataloging here. These are each when things get added or lost in this level, like the threshold is just like tiny, right? We've talked about this, where the scores are, and that's where the heat map can really show, like the scores are there, and then this threshold that we've just put on, boom, you know, a couple things change in this way, and really it's mostly about feeling comfortable about where you are with this. I will mention for those who haven't seen this, when you float over a different tract, you'll get different information on that tract. So you'll get the count of the place name if it's available, the population, income, poverty measures, race ethnicity measures, redlining scores if it was available, and then you've got the different percentile scores. And in this case, the burden percentile is basically 0, which is weird. But the vulnerability is very high. And what that tells me is that there are a few kind of, well, very low climate issues and kind of more on the health, ethnicity, income issues that are happening here. So that might be the part. And that I think is true across some of the other ones that we'll see too. So I'm going to zoom out here. What I'm hearing is that it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm not quite sure whether those additions are helpful or not.
Alex, Julie has her hand up.
Oh, Julie.
Thanks. I wasn't sure if I could pop in. Thanks, Alana. You know, just based on windshield driving through Owego on a fairly often basis, I worry a little bit about losing that community, although I don't have enough substance behind that to say anything else about it. But I think I have one overall question, if you don't mind, Alex.
Yeah.
So for the climate, and I apologize to everyone, I'm still so new, catching up, appreciate the briefing materials, but are we looking at these in just one vacuum, or will we have a chance to look at what would happen with all 3 different indicators? Because as we're going through diabetes, I'm still wondering, okay, maybe we lose Owego because of the diabetes issue, but maybe we're counting the small scale rural airports that may be around it, or rail lines that may be around it. And so I'm just wondering, do you have one map to look at that has all 3 of those characteristics?
We do, and I'm trying to remember which one it is, but it might be this one. This one's diabetes in proximity to rail. So we have all the things as far as the combinations of them. And let's see here. It looks like, you know, there are some more changes, but if I'm looking at this area for just if rail doesn't seem to, you're still going to lose those. And I don't think you gain, oh no, you do. So basically the same for that. And then there's so many other ones here. I think we've got, this is why there's 8 maps. It's a little extra as far as like all the additions, but they matter, right? So let's look
I'm
at
just
this one
thinking
as
Owego's flooded a bunch of times, so that may be why it's on there from a climate risk perspective, but I'm not familiar enough to say that confidently.
Yeah, and in this case, what I'm seeing is this is the proximity to airports and diabetes together. And if we look here, we're not seeing, there's no changes in the DAX at this point. And then let's look here. So yeah, there would be 0 change.
Very much, Alex.
And just so you know, Julie, pop in anytime. I can't see the hands raised, so I'm fine with you guys interrupting me. You don't have to be polite on this. I think it's really important that you all feel comfortable in understanding what this crazy process is, especially as we look for so many of these maps. Okay, so there's some question here if we add diabetes on its own, whether this would be helpful or not. So I'm gonna scroll this way and then scroll through, try to get my bearings. There are no changes here, so we're gonna go straight to this area and see what we can see. Okay. In the Mid-Hudson area, we would lose 2 here and another one here. Looks like there's another one somewhere. Maybe there's 2. Nope. Here we go. We would lose Eastchester. So there's 1 gain, and I bet you it's down here where I can't see it, but I don't see any yellow. Anyone feel like they want to say anything about the Mid-Hudson area and the losses or addition or losses here? Okay, I'm going to actually look at the specific changes, and what you'll see here is that when you look at the scores, especially the burden percentiles and the vulnerability percentiles for the different groups, or scenario 1 versus scenario 2 in this case, you can see that for scenario 2, the vulnerability percentile goes down in this case, and that's why it's being lost. Up here, same thing, it's actually almost identical. So this must really be on the threshold on the kind of tiny changes. And in this case, same thing. There's a lot of burden here, probably a lot of flooding, maybe, I don't know. But actually, I'm not sure that's true. But there's a lot of burden here, but not vulnerability, which is in contrast to what we just looked at with Southern Tier, which was quite a bit different. Okay, so now I'm going to go through here. This is the last part of Mid-Hudson, but we're getting close to New York City here. This is the one that would be added, Mount Vernon City. And this is another one that would be lost. Okay, now we're going to go into New York City, and I'm just going to start moving us through here because this is where New York City was. You've got 12 added and 13 removed when it comes to this. So a net loss of 1 census tract, but they're just flipping into different areas. So Sonal, you do not ever have to speak for all of New York City, but tell me where you want me to go and we can take a look at things. And then again, it's not like we can ground truth every single part of New York State. What we can do is say, is this addition based on the information we have overall feeling like it's making a more accurate DAC map or not, right? And so that's why we look at the statistics in addition to the ground truthing here.
Great. And yes, let the record show I do not speak for all of New York City. And of course we'll address that. But I think zooming in on Queens, like around JFK, would be a good place to look, kind of like we did a little bit
Okay.
last time.
Let me see what I can do here. Okay, so we've got one loss around JFK area in Queens. It's interesting that, I mean, the changes in the percentiles are again, like probably in the significant digits behind the percent here, because it's 9 and 100 percentile for both of these. But so it's right on the tipping point no matter what. And really kind of minutia of difference here. So this would be lost, but then you would have these additions. And let me know if you want me to zoom in even more. This is around Cedar Manor.
No, I think that zoomed in enough. I think that does seem overall like a good thing.
This would again be a loss. And then I know we're kind of moving away from JFK, but these also would be losses right here.
Are you able to go more north?
Yeah.
Moving away from JFK a bit.
So these would also be losses.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because all of these losses are in areas that you wouldn't want to lose census tracts. But the gains near JFK is also a good thing. So it's hard to say which one's better.
Yeah. But I think that's what's so tough about this, and also kind of the more like policy aspect of this decision as far as adding or not adding anything right now is trying to really assess things. And what we can do is look at it again next year and try to see whether there are other changes that happen.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like clear enough benefit where for at least Brooklyn and Queens here, what we can see shows a clear benefit to changing what we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these yellow ones would be added, but again, then yes, we would start losing different parts. And I know this is in the Kings area, but we're kind of losing some of those. Okay, now I want to move to Long Island. So in Long Island, there would be addition of these two near Hempstead. And then down here in Freeport. There would be a loss up here, West Hills. And then additions here and here. And let's look and see if there's anything further out. There probably should not be, but yep. Okay, so this is diabetes. And I want to show you before we kind of start doing into combinations of things.
Alex, can you hear us?
Yep.
What were those last two yellows on Long Island? I didn't see the towns.
Yeah, here, let me zoom in a lot more. So this is Islandia Village in Central Islip, if I'm saying that right. And then Brentwood.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I want us to look at the proximity to air outside of adding to airports, outside of adding diabetes, and then proximity to rail outside of adding diabetes or anything else. Please. And then what I'd like us to do from those is kind of take a quick thumbs up vote and have some discussions about whether we want to add those or not. And then we can always talk about the combination of things if we want to as well. Does that sound like a good process for everyone? Okay. You know, I don't like silence for ascension, but I'm just gonna, or acceptance, but I'm just gonna roll with it today right now.
It was nonverbal communication.
That I can't see.
We're good.
So, yeah.
We're good.
Okay, cool. Okay, so this is adding proximity to airports only. I'm going to go through the same process where I start from kind of here in Jamestown and go all the way around. We'll say this is a net loss of 1, and the areas that we really want to look at are Long Island, insofar as like there's gaining and losing of New York State here, or New York City, and then we've got kind of onesie twosies in other areas, Western New York, we're going to want to look there, and then Mid-Hudson, looks like there's a bit of a change there too. So let's start Jamestown. I don't think there's anything that we can do there. So I'm going to go into Buffalo, and I know that we don't have a representative for this, but I just want to look at the stats. I think it's important that we all see what this looks like in this across the whole state. Okay, so here we've got a couple different ones that are added. And I'm just going to look at the scores and note that there really are not that big of a difference as far as the percentile scores at the bottom there. So it's hard for us to assess what's really going on, other than that these are very much on the tipping point. It looks like this one, the burden score for scenario 2 is or for scenario 5 is a little bit higher. And then here we've got a loss and another loss and another loss. By the way, for those who, when we start looking at these and there's no actual data for vulnerability data, it's because it is a low population area, and therefore, or at least there's no availability for data. I don't know why. I think in this case, it's mostly probably because it's considered a university area. So you won't see those scores sometimes. Okay. I'm going to move over here to Rochester, and it looks like there's no additions for Rochester, just losses. So we've got North Gates is lost. And then down here, we've got Institute of Technology area is also lost. We'll say this is like south of the university, so Fenner. Abby, any thoughts on losing these?
Of course, I'd rather not.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so now I'm going to go to North Country. I think this is going to get interesting again. And because we're going to see the same census tracts like pop or not, because again, we're kind of only working on those like small threshold areas. So if we add proximity to airports, the Altona CDP area is also added, and also Fort Covington is added. But there is no changes in Messina or Ogdensburg.
I find that it's Jill. I just find this fascinating. Like, to my knowledge, there is not an airport in Altona. There's one in Plattsburgh for sure. There's one in Ogdensburg. There's one in Lake Clear. And I understand that this plays a very small part in the equation that pushes the threshold into what would qualify it as a DAC. I get that. I guess what I'm grappling with is, as I already stated, I don't think that right now is the best time to add indicators for a multitude of reasons. I'm also concerned about the tracks are already changing because of the census data. So we're, after this happens, regardless of if we add indicators or not, whether we like it or not, people are gonna come to us because some of the disadvantaged communities in the state, in our regions, are going to be lost. So part of me sees this and it was like, great, we lost that Fort Covington tract when we updated the census, but now we're adding it back in because of this indicator. But I don't think that that is a good reason to add indicators at this point. Because I realize that that's just the North Country and it may look different in other places. Like Abby's losing 2 tracks in Rochester, and obviously I'm sure there's an airport in Rochester that is impacting that area. So, yeah.
I know. So remember the proximity to air. So I want to cover lots of different things that you said, Jill, because I think they're all really important to cover. Proximity to air is a modeled thing based on noise. And so the airports here might just be that there's something noisy around there. And it might just not be right directly in Fort Covington, but it's close enough somewhere else that it's pushing this forward. Same here. But I also want to address your point, which I think is a very valid one. As kind of this all changes and we've had a big update as far as the data being updated to 2020, that, and also the makeup of the working group itself has changed, that if you don't want to vote or add anything, I think that's fine. It's entirely up to you guys. That is not that, like me, neutral party, as a facilitator, that's me with that hat. And that's where I'm like, just you guys get that to make that decision. And then me, other hat, technical kind of expert on this type of, the math and all that. It's all on just this tight line of a couple percentage points in one way or another. And that's what's flipping these things. And so again, it's a policy decision, and what I would like for you all, as we kind of look at these, you're going to look at them and you're like, well, they're all on the threshold anyway, right? They all should, maybe if we had our druthers, should be considered DACs anyway. And now you're having to make this trade-off analysis and know that these are just on that threshold and they're just so close either way. I would like for you all to think through, does it feel more accurate one way or another? Or if it feels like a toss-up, then my view and position has always been, in this case, that keeping to fewer indicators is probably better. And that's just my mathematical, like, parsimony desire. But that's just a kind of a statistics thing. So.
I'm sorry, it's Julie again. Can you go back to the airport criteria? Because something you said really sparked my attention and I've kind of been struggling.
Wait, Julie, I can't hear you very well.
Sorry, can you go back to the airport criteria? Because something you said really sparked my interest. You said, because I'm struggling with how we're counting what an airport is, right? I think of a lot of planes overhead, noise pollution, a lot of air emissions. Okay, I get that. But some small rural airstrips, for instance, may operate maybe once a month with like small scale planes. But I think you said that picking up airstrips is more about noise, and it may not be airports that you're actually picking up when you were talking about the 2 North Country sites. And that I just was really curious about that.
Yeah, I don't have the slides here to show you the specific data that we pulled, but I can always kind of chat with you about the technical component of it later. The original maps are about noise pollution, and they are modeled data based on various things. So that has proximity to airports, or just basically airport noise or airplane noise. It's got rail noise and traffic noise. And there was some discussion about proximity to airports and wanting to add that. And so in like many of the things we're doing, we're using a data set that isn't just saying, oh, well, here is an airport, but rather here is the modeled amount of noise based on, say, frequency of flights and all those kinds of things. And it goes beyond the footprint specifically of that airport, right? And so it's actually pretty cool facsimile in this case, because it goes a little bit beyond just that one like airport area. So it's not just JFK, it's all the other areas close by it that we'll see in a little bit when we go to New York City. So it's like an indirect measure of proximity to airports. And you know, there are quite a few where we've kind of taken the concept of something and tried to find the best possible data set that is a proxy to that. This is very much one of them.
Alex, thank you. I appreciate it. And my apologies to everybody for still catching up.
Hey, don't apologize. This stuff is crazy. Can I just say, like, the amount of data and information that you're trying to like fire hose into, these are, and also really important to have these conversations, because some people, like, it's a good reminder to be just really, really, really open about all this stuff. So please, I think it's important. Okay, I'm going to move to Southern Tier before we go to Mid-Hudson. I know we kind of looked at this really quick before. In this case, if we just add proximity to airports, we're going to lose Owego, and then up here, Endicott Village. But this was the one right here, Binghamton, that was added. If we looked at diabetes, it's not added in terms of proximity to airports. Okay, I'm going to go to the Mid-Hudson, and we're going to look there and see what's added and taken away. Let's look at the north side here. Mountain Dale and Woodburn are added up here. And then up here we've got Haviland by Hyde Park is also added. And here you can see actually the burden percentile actually going down for 5, which is interesting. I wonder if these are flipped. Nope. But we've got this edition, and then these are the ones that are lost. So Brinkenhoff, this was the one that was lost with diabetes as well. Woodbury Village is lost. Verplanck. Kruger's. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here. We've got Nenwet, also lost within White Plains, another one lost, and Rybrook Village added. And then we've got Harrison Village lost. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here so we can see these a bit better. And Greenville. Yonkers. And Eastchester. These are all lost. So generally speaking, Mid-Hudson loses 6 tracks. It gains 4, and it's kind of a choice as to, you know, viewing which ones they are. Okay. Now here is where you start seeing the additions because of airports. It's a very large airport, so it lets us see where the modeling kind of gets it right. So not only you want to see here a lot of yellow when it comes to the flight patterns of JFK, but that also means that there's a lot of losses in other areas in New York City. So it's an even swap of 23. So a change in actual 46 census tracts. Is there any place that you want me to look at specifically?
Maybe you could move a little east. Just to see what else might be lost.
We've
Sorry.
got
The other direction. I should've
west.
said west. Thank you. Central Queensland.
Do you want me to zoom in any more? Or is this kind of,
Yeah, maybe where there's kind of like a hot spot of red areas lost down in Brooklyn,
yeah.
Central Brooklyn. Yeah, right around here.
Okay, let me pull this up. So this one right here, I mean, it's Kings, but you've got that, and then here we've got more in Brooklyn, not Ocean Hill.
POG, Flatbush.
And I can zoom in a little more if it helps. There's Flatbush right here is lost. And then we've got this one down here. So yeah, there's definitely some losses when it comes to further away from the airport. And I'm just going to kind of come up here and Bushwick, we're losing this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's like interesting that there's sporadic losses across lots of neighborhoods, but most of these, it would be a loss to have their DAC criteria taken away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so these are the additions here. And this is where this kind of stuff, especially, again, it's sporadic and feels kind of random, right? That they're all kind of spread out. It's not like a thing. It's mostly because when you think of New York City and we're looking for it, like these are all on the threshold. So this tract in Ozone Park has kind of right bumping up against the threshold. And so are these that are getting lost. The ones that are green have higher scores overall anyway, and so they're really decidedly DACs. And so these are all the ones that are kind of close on the threshold. And it does feel random sometimes. Okay, I'm just going to look really quick at Long Island. And we've got, again, kind of this loss here in Huntington, West Hills. But some additions here, Amityville, and then right here. So again, my sense from you all is that you're still reticent to be thinking like this doesn't feel so definitively right or righter that it's making you want to add things. I'm going to make you do this one more time with proximity to rail, and then I want us to kind of really kind of go through and have a good talk about, is this worth adding or changing anything? What should we do, etc. Okay, net change of loss of 2 tracks overall. Mid-Hudson again loses more, so they lose 10, but there's a shift again from 6 added and 16 lost. New York City is going to have a big one as far as 48 added and 48 lost. So proximity to rail is going to really matter. And I think that makes a lot of sense considering there's a lot of rail. And then Long Island has added 12 and lost 3. So another one as far as the rail. Again, makes sense. So going around the map, I'm just going to highlight Buffalo as the first area to go through, and then we'll go all the way around as we have. Similar to airport, we're gaining these right here, but then losing some of these more northern areas. There's a bit more loss up here. than before. And then these two tracks are again losses, Medina Village and kind of, there's no name. I can't tell you what the place is. Okay, now we're going to go up and around. There's here in Batavia. This is an addition. Okay, now we get to Rochester. Rochester gains 1, loses 3. Hilton Village gets lost, North Gates, and the same area before in the kind of Henrietta area.
Sorry, Alex, can you scooch over west again? The two big lost ones, what county were they in?
They are in Orleans and then Genesee.
Yeah, so I don't love this.
Okay. Yeah, there must be no rails here. Let me move over. We've got Clyde Village being added. And then as we, so the Finger Lakes-ish area above it. This is the most interesting census tract island I've ever seen. Okay, now we've got Fulton City gets lost. And then now I'm going to scroll out and up to North Country. And there are no changes whatsoever in North Country. And then if we scroll down to the Mid-Hudson area, well, this would be Mohawk Valley. Little Falls City gets added. And then Johnston City gets added. And another island here, Hoosick Falls Village gets added. So you can start seeing the corridor of rail happening here and then all the way down. So on that rail line, Coxsackie Village gets added, Glasgow gets added, but then away from the rail now we've lost Mountain Dale. And here, wow, another island, New Paltz Village, Pleasant Valley, Millington Village, Brinkerhoff. Okay, we've got Fishkill. Then I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here so that we can see a bit more in Newburgh what's happening. This is its own census tract right here. Beacon City. And then down here, we've got a loss for Monroe Village and Woodbury Village. And then additions for Mount Kisco and White Plains City. And a loss here for in Spring Valley for Nenwet. And then we've got more here. Harrison Village gets added. Mount Vernon City gets added. Yonkers City gets added here, but then there's some losses. Eastchester, more Yonkers, a couple other ones here that get lost in Yonkers City. Okay. So New York City is really going to be affected here. Again, we've got almost 100 census tract changes so going on here. And what that means is, and you can kind of see the rail lines here. So you've got JFK, the areas around JFK are being added along a rail line. There's more up in Queens up here, but then some significant losses kind of in the Brooklyn area. And also if we go through here, there's some losses. So, Sonal, any place you want me to kind of really peek at?
Um, I mean, we've been focused on Brooklyn and Queens here. I wonder if there's anything going on in the Bronx that's worth checking on. We go up.
Yep. There's not a lot. We've got 2 losses and then 1 addition.
For New York City, could what's being reflected in the losses here also speak to an issue of, by New York City standards, of transit desert, where it's actually an issue that some areas don't have the proximity? Because for New York City, the railways also include subway lines.
But can you say that first part first? Because you kind of came in and out.
Oh, I'm just wondering if the map, like the losses piece, is reflecting actually a problem with those areas, that they don't have enough proximity to transit. Because for New York City specific, we're talking about the subway lines, right? So most people in New York City would consider that a problem, that they're not close to the railway, aka the subway.
Yep.
So I'm thinking about what is the interpretation of what this means in New York City versus other parts of New York State, where the losses are actually speaking potentially to the people that are disadvantaged by New York City definition, where they don't have enough subway access.
Yeah, I think it definitely is measuring something very similar to what you're saying, right?
Is subway included in rail, or is it just above ground traditional rail?
Because it's noise pollution, it is included.
Yeah,
It's noise, like if there's an underground subway, like you can feel the ground shake, but it's not gonna be as loud as like an above ground train.
Yeah, so it's more
So
muted.
some areas are above ground and quite noisy.
And, you know, because these are model data, it's not perfect. And so we could look at the individual maps for this and as far as those model data, but you can actually see the rail lines, you can see the subway lines in some of those data in the kind of original maps, not what we've done, which is like block it out and census tract stuff. So this might be something, I mean, I think it's definitely something to just discuss. In this case, technically speaking, this is a huge change for New York City. And the policy, I think, decision here is this a change that is useful or not? And what I hear Sonal you saying is it actually might be, you know, from a theoretical perspective, showing not helpfulness because it could further, you know, as far as the losses here, could be actually showing more disadvantagedness than would otherwise be something, you know, that we're trying to measure. Is that an accurate summary?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, we're gonna look at Long Island.
This is Abby. Just, you know, I was actually having similar thoughts looking at Rochester, like, gosh, I wish we had rail, you know? So this is a hard one to interpret in a way.
Well, I think what's interesting here is like maybe this is not the right way of trying to get rail data, because the idea behind this rail data is to talk about pollution. And that was the original discussion of it. And so the using the actual kind of noise as a proxy in this case may be emphasizing or kind of like just not balancing that quite right. So maybe we have to figure out something as far as like pollution around rail and other areas. But make it more of like those industrial large rails that are, you know, basically kind of more in the middle of the state running across that corridor. So
Yeah,
we'll have
'cause
to,
sorry.
no, go ahead.
I mean, isn't New York City like one of the largest electric rail systems in the country, the world, or something? So like, it's kind of in opposition to that.
Because it's electric.
Yeah, and it's not running, like we're talking about pollution from the railways, like what they're running and what they're doing.
Yeah.
I guess this is Amy. When I had raised rail as an issue, I was thinking specifically about commercial rail and specifically about how commercial rail runs through a variety of disadvantaged communities, you know, especially here in the capital region. And I'm sure that's the case in, you know, many other urban areas across the state. So I don't know if this data got to what I had originally been thinking about. But I was thinking about sort of those dangers that it poses, you know, that commercial rail poses.
Yeah. I think that makes sense.
If I could just add to that, to Amy's point, I think this also comes from some letters that we received from advocates from disadvantaged communities or EJ communities in Southeast Queens who are concerned about proximity to rail for the same purpose. I think specifically waste being railed from Long Island through Southeast Queens. So it's commercial, but it sounds like maybe we're picking up more than just that with this data set. Thanks.
We definitely are. So I think I would technically from this discussion, and especially because like all the things here, we're using a proxy to measure that, right? I'm going to make a strong recommendation that we ditch this as an indicator as articulated with the data we have, and that we can in the future try to find a better measure of commercial rail so that we're capturing what really needs to be captured in this case. With that, I'm going to stop sharing because I want to see you all and move us. Actually, I'm not going to stop sharing because I want to show this right here. This is not the right one. This right here. I'd like us to kind of discuss what we do with all this information. And there's a couple discussions from what I've heard just in this conversation overall. We had set this up to be like, okay, well, let's do some interim votes here about using like including diabetes, including airport proximity, and then railroad proximity. But I think what I'm hearing, and I want all of us to discuss, or want you all to discuss because it's your decision, is do you want to make any changes right now? And then if you don't want to make any changes right now, do you want to vote on that today? So let's start there. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'll facilitate this. But this is again, yeah.
Alex, it's Lana. I noticed that, you know, obviously since this is a little bit longer meeting than we usually do. I just wanted to propose, since we are halfway through, if we wanted to take a quick break. I know we want to get to this, but you know, does anybody want to take a quick break at any point during this, or do we want to just power through?
Break would be appreciated.
We got a power through vote over here.
I'll take a break.
Yeah, we've got a couple votes for break.
Let's do 5 minutes. I'll put my timer on. Everyone come back at 37 after the hour.
Thanks.
Okay, just want to check and see if everyone's back.
We're back here in Saratoga.
You're in Albany, Alex.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Mostly back in New York City.
Okay, well, I think I'll get started at least in kind of the direction that I'm suggesting we go. And so there's a couple things. Had kind of set this up to be some interim votes, which I think we can talk about, but multiple folks on the working group have mentioned the discomfort of wanting to make any changes so far or this year for various reasons. And if that's the case, then those interim votes seem kind of not necessary. So I'd like to open the floor to that conversation, and I'd like everyone who is a voting member to chime in. So I'm going to start just because you're, Abby, right there on my screen at the top left. So please start.
Yes, I would love to just go straight for it and do the vote. I think based on what I've been hearing, we're all on the same page. Just, updating to the 2020 census information and sticking with that for now. I think that's what I've heard from people. So would love to just vote on that today if possible.
Okie dokes. Thank you. Albany, let's hear from you next. I'm just going around my screen, so this is random.
This is Amy. I totally agree with Abby. I think we should update the data and hold off on any other adding of indicators. It didn't even seem like it made sense to add those indicators.
Okay. Neil and Michael, I'd like to hear from you too.
Yeah.
You want to go or you want me to go first? Okay. Yeah, I agree with Abby as well. And Amy, my thought was, I think having gone through this and listening to everybody, it's going to be really hard in the future to add indicators too. So it might be an opportunity to take some meetings in the next year and come up with like more of maybe a formal process for almost criteria that we would use to make this judgment. Just because I think it's hard to have gone through this and then, nobody wants to see like communities discluded or excluded who were previously included. So that would be my thought moving forward. But at this point, totally in agreement with moving forward with just the update to the census tracts.
Great. And yeah, I think actually that's a great idea for coming up with that type of process. Something that we created for very early in this process a couple of years ago to even like think through and look at different indicators and assess them. So maybe we can formalize that process going forward. Because yes, it's going to get increasingly harder. We're talking about minutia in that threshold, and that's just darn hard to make policy decisions on. Michael?
Yeah, just echoing everybody else, and some of even just that last conversation of the intent and the data source we have, maybe not meeting that intent. So I think and then I'm also mindful, Alex, something you've mentioned a lot too about diluting the other indicators that are in there already. So I think there needs to be like a really compelling reason to add, and I haven't really. It doesn't seem like there's a strong case and I'm really looking to a lot of the community representatives here to reflect that, from where we sit. I think just management of expectations and consistency can be helpful for communicating and promoting, this policy through our programs. So if there's not a strong reason, which I'm not hearing, then I would definitely support us, following the vote with just updating to the census, 2020 census.
Okay, great. Elizabeth, I see you, New York City. Let's hear from you first.
Sure. In terms of voting today, I would like not to, just because I need official like sign off. I thought we were just reviewing things, and because we're 3 members down, I thought we were gonna do it next month. So if we vote today, I'd probably abstain, just to make sure I can have the go ahead. I think generally we're all going in the same direction, but that's my thought for today.
Okay. Going around, Julie, what is your thoughts, or what are your thoughts?
I'm wholeheartedly in favor of updating to the 2020 census. I'm also wholeheartedly in favor of, I think it's somebody in the NYSERDA room saying that we should have a better criteria or revert to the original criteria, which I'm not familiar with how we track things to be added to the criteria list, because I admit, and Amber, I appreciate you backing me up on the chat, you know, the thought that we might inadvertently exclude a place like Owego that has a ton of climate risks from floods has me a little bit worried. So I like the thought of having a more systemic process for how we consider criteria in the future. But I appreciate all your work, Alex. It was really interesting.
Yeah. And I will note, just for kind of clarity, that there is part of this that, you know, several meetings ago, we kind of reviewed the actual data and the maps. And so there was elements of this, but sometimes you don't see it until you've looked at all the maps and really dig in. And so I will say that I think we should definitely, and noted now from multiple people, create a criteria, or at least adapt what we already have for discussing additions and changes. I think also this is speaking to trying to find that through line across those multiple meetings and trying to make sure that everyone is kind of up to speed on that. Not to say that you're not, but what I'm trying to say is, like, I think having those backup slides so that when we start looking at the maps and have those questions again, like proximity to rail is a real important one there, like going back and being like, okay, well, this is what it looked like, because we now have new information as far as interpreting the comparisons in the maps. And that's always just such a process, circular but yet forward motion process. So I think we'll do that. I appreciate it. Amber, I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, so I think it's important to update from the data from the 2025 census. As far as the other tracks, I feel as if the changes, I don't feel as if they were that significant. And also, like, the thing about it diluting some of the other tracks that we feel that are important, that makes me a little bit uncomfy that would happen. But that would happen regardless. But I just don't think that these tracks are the ones that I would want to do that. But I do vote on getting the 2025 census data in there.
Okay, great, thank you. Sonal, how about you?
Yeah, I'm prepared to vote today if that's what we do. And I think it sounds like we're all on the same page.
Okay. Jill?
Hi. Yeah, I'm prepared to vote to not add any indicators, but to update to the 2020 census data. I also just really appreciate Illum and Alex and walking us through this really complicated process in a way that we can all understand. And it's not lost on me that change in membership puts a lot of pressure on you guys and DC and NYSERDA staff. So thanks for getting everybody on the same page. So yeah, I'll vote, but to not add any indicators right now.
Okay, great. Adriana, I just saw you step in. I just want to cover, because as a voting member, we were just discussing. What's that?
I'm the voting member.
Oh, okay, sorry. Alana, where are you?
I'm right here, sorry.
You're invisible. Okay, thank you. I didn't mean to mess that up. Go for it, Alana. I would like to hear from you too.
So I agree that we should vote to update to the 2020 census data and maybe hold off on adding any indicators until we can take a look at this when we go back and maybe see if we can find ways to sort of isolate specific issues that we're looking to solve for. You know, I think that some of the indicators that were suggested, maybe because of how we look at them, maybe they're too broad, maybe they're capturing what we're not necessarily wanting to capture. And because there are areas of the state that maybe don't have, for example, airports in proximity or are isolated from rail, that actually eliminates them rather than just simply adding. So I would rather see us see if we can drill down and get a little bit, find some data that gets to those hyper-specific, issues that we're talking about, noise specifically, rather than, proxies for noise. So I'm ready to move forward with voting for updating to the 2020 census data and leaving, potentially adding additional indicators to the next round.
Okay, thank you. Did I miss anyone?
That's 10.
That's 10.
That's
Okay.
10.
I want to add one additional part. A couple meetings ago, we went through the methodological kind of components. There hasn't been any discussion about changing any of those in the last few meetings, but I want to bring up before we vote, because it seems like everyone sub one person is ready to vote today. Do you want me to go through those methodological components? That's like the weighting, it's those thresholds that we tinkered with, all that kind of stuff. Or are you all good? Tell you what,
I'm good.
you're good.
Well, and we're not proposing changing any of them, right?
No,
So what would, I guess my question is, what would be the purpose of going through them if they're not on the table for adjustment?
Because I want to be as transparent about what we have done as possible. Okay, in that vote, because I want to be transparent and because we have new members, even though we've shown this, I'm going to show those really fast and then we're going to move to a vote. And Alana, stop me if there's anything I'm missing that you think we should do. Okay, sharing. And let me see. Okay, so we've got a couple things here. I want to talk about double weighting of factors.
Sorry.
Can everyone see my screen? Cool. Okay, in this, we've got, the way that we're scoring multiple things in the components right here, we've got 3 different factors. And because of the kind of, especially in the legislation, the potential climate change risk being something that was very strongly highlighted, and to kind of give equal weight to the component scores of environmental burdens versus population characteristics and vulnerabilities, we double weighted this factor. That means that all of these together kind of have like combine into that environmental burdens, but this potential climate change risk is double weighted. So these elements have more weight in this overall component score. The other part that is weighted, not by factor, but indicator, the income indicators within this factor, the income, education, and employment factor, are double weighted. And then the percent Latino, Latina, and the Black African American indicators are double weighted within this factor. These are actually pretty small changes, but they matter, right? Because they count then as like 2. Okay, now we also designated thresholds in the scoring. So we've got that kind of urban and rural thing going on. And what we did was kind of keep that regional scoring that we've discussed before. And I can go through the history of that, but I don't think that we discussed this kind of really closely last time. The other thing that we have not discussed changing at all is including individual criteria and using the state median income to do that, which matches the eligibility for a lot of other program administrative components. So if we are okay to vote, I want to kind of outline the voting process and then the voting rules. Any questions, please speak up. I can't see hands raised. So if you have any questions, here we
I
go.
want to say I have approval to vote now, so we're good.
Oh, well, that was quick and awesome. Cool. Okay, so we've discussed each element of the DAC criteria, the geographic definition, the individual households criteria. You can propose alternatives to indicators and methodologies at any time before the final vote. Vote on the final criteria, and then each person is permitted to give a 2-minute statement to explain their final vote. Any questions? Voting rules, we require a quorum. All members have an equal vote, including agency representatives, and it will be a roll call vote. And here are the things we're voting on. Like last time, there was all this stuff. Basically, what this says is updating to 2020 census, refreshing all the indicators like we did, but making no other changes. You all cool? Okay, I'm going to vote, and I am going to stop my screen. And Alana, I'll do the vote since you're voting. I'll do the facilitation of it, but can someone keep score for me?
Yep, we can do that.
Cool. Elizabeth, now that you have the ability to vote, please vote.
Elizabeth Firth, Department of Labor, I vote yes.
Thank you. Okay, Albany Boardroom.
Amy Klein, yes.
Neil Muscatello for DOH, yes.
Michael Duramio for NYSERDA. Yes, just happy that we're able to update and have more accurate information based on the recent census and the updated data. So very happy to vote yes.
Great. Jill?
I vote yes. And a reminder to everybody how important it is to participate in your biennial census.
Yes, I will. And the American Community Survey if you ever get asked, please. Alana?
Tucky, from Department of Environmental Conservation, and I vote yes.
Thank you. Julie?
Joyce Suarez, I vote yes as well.
Thank you. Sonal?
Sonal Jessel, I vote yes.
Okay, great. Amber?
Amber Johnson, and I vote yes.
And last but not least,
Abby McHugh-Griffa, I enthusiastically vote yes.
cool. Does anyone want to make any statements about any of this? The vote? Just want to open the floor. Okay. Well, guys, I think we just did it. So that is an official and unanimous vote. And thank you all for going through this process. I know it is hard. And I've also heard you, I think what we'll start to do coming forward is to think through a process for how to do this. And I think we have one, but I want us to adapt it now that we really are getting to a place where we have this established thing. And especially now that we're at 2020 census, we got some breathing room now. That was a big push to get that done. And so now there can be a process where we're really feeling more like we can make these comparisons and that they feel real for us. So we'll work with the agency folks to create that process and present it to you in the coming year as we do this again. Alana, I'm going to hand it over to you and mute myself, but thank you. I appreciate this. And I just want to say on the technical team, I've got Emily Morris and Sergio Arada, who have done a ton of the math behind this. So I just want to give them props. You see me, but it's not me. Okay, Alana?
Thanks, Alex. And again, a big, just hearty thanks to Illum. You guys have been amazing partners over these last 5 years. Last 5 years. Amazing work bringing all this to us and all the hours that you put in and the hours that you put in answering questions. Eternally grateful to you, to the technical team from NYSERDA and DEC. and, DOH, DOL, thank you so much for all your help, and to the Climate Justice Working Group members. We did it again, I know that this isn't exactly probably what we were hoping for. We're probably hoping to make some big sweeping changes, but again, this is our first update of this data. And we will be looking at this again very shortly. We are in February and June, August, it's going to be here before we know it. So we will have an opportunity to kind of review, see what some reports from agencies are looking at, like when it comes to the investments and benefits and numbers, and see what we see. So again, thank you everybody for the time that you've put in. I know that this can be a burden to everyone to come in to take 2-3 hours out of your day. We're all extremely busy. So I am grateful that you not only take the time, but you also travel to these locations that we're required to be in order to meet quorum. And you've all been always available and very just forthcoming when things aren't going the way you would like them to. So I want that to continue. Because we did have this meeting, we probably will not need our March meeting. But I will remind folks that in addition to working on the disadvantaged communities criteria, the Climate Justice Working Group does also have consultation requirements on other items. We will make sure that we schedule meetings specifically on the extreme heat action plan. We'll make sure that we are scheduling those out. Those don't have to necessarily be in person, so we can do those via WebEx. But for now, we'll take that March meeting off of the calendar, and we'll make sure that we are in touch with everybody moving forward, make those updates, and all of the information that we had today, I'll make sure that that's updated and added to our SharePoint page. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for all this work that you've been doing, especially folks who've been with us, especially folks who've been with us for the last almost 5 years on this. And we'll talk again soon. But of course, as always, if anybody has any questions, comments, concerns, my email is always open. So feel free to email me. And like I said, we'll look to get another poll out for everyone's scheduling so we can get ready to do this all again in a couple of months.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes. Happy Valentine's Day.
Oh.
Bye, everybody.